In the beginning of Parshas Chukas, the Torah describes the purification process that an individual who become impure, tameh, goes through in order to restore himself to the status of being pure. And the method by which a person becomes impure in the first place is through what we call the avi avos hatuma, which is the greatest source of impurity, and that being a dead body. If an individual touches a dead body, or an individual is in a closed space with a dead body, so then that person has to go through a purification process. Now this purification process is only possible with the appearance of the para aduma. Para aduma is a red cow. The Torah explains that one has to take a red cow, and this cow has to be specifically, when we say red, we mean absolutely red, that it can't even have one hair in it that is not red. It also has to be a cow that never had a yoke on it. And this cow is taken outside of the machane, outside of the camp, and it is slaughtered by one individual, and then it is burnt by another individual, and each person who touches this cow, they themselves become impure. And finally, after the cow is burnt, the ashes of the cow are then taken and mixed with water to become sprinkling water that is used to purify an individual who became tameh. Now, this purification process would take place if an individual had become in touch with a dead body. If the person became tameh, he would be sprinkled on at certain times, and over a period of 7 days, eventually this individual would become pure, would once again restore himself to the status of being able to go into the Mishkan or be able to go into the Beis HaMikdash. If a person would walk into the Mishkan, to the tabernacle, or to the Beis HaMikdash, into the Holy Temple, while they were impure, that individual would suffer terrible consequences in that they would be cut off from the Jewish people. So it was very necessary during the times of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash to have the Para Aduma so that we can go through a purification process if we became impure. Now, it wasn't only a person who became impure by being near a dead body or touching a dead body, but the Torah explains that even if there was a vessel, an earthenware vessel, that itself was not covered, and that vessel was in the same room as a dead body, that vessel becomes tameh, it becomes impure for a period of 7 days. So the Chavetz Chaim comments on this and says that this law of the vessel that was uncovered did not have a secure cover to it, and therefore air was able to flow into it, the air which was impure, that it becomes contaminated. The Chavetz Chaim explains that this is the same as a human being, as an individual. How so? So he explains that we as individuals also are pure naturally inside of us. But if we don't know when to close the opening that we have, when to close our mouths, at certain times that we should close our mouths, then ultimately tumah, impurity, is able to set in. And if impurity is able to set in, then our entire being becomes contaminated. And this, of course, in the spiritual sense, that the Chavetz Chaim is teaching us that a person has to be very careful when it comes to what it is that they say. A person has to be careful to know when it is to open their mouth and speak, and when it is to close their mouth and hold back from speaking. A person has to be careful to know when to comment on something and when a person should simply be silent. The Chavetz Chaim spent his entire life focusing on the concept of shmiras halashon, of being careful with one's tongue, of making sure that we are careful with the words that come out of our mouths, and not simply saying that we need to be careful, but actually in our daily lives, watching ourselves and guarding our tongue. So many times we say to other people when we're talking to them, I know this might be Lashon Hara, but here it is. All because we identify something as Lashon Hara doesn't mean that we should say it. It means that we need to, even on a small scale, become conscious of the fact that not everything that we are thinking should be coming out of our mouth. And just as we make that calculation when it comes to business activity or when it comes to something which is valuable in a relationship, we don't always say what may be on our mind. The first step is that when it comes to any other relationship or interaction in life, we should also be just as careful to realize that there is a great deal at stake, and to choose our words carefully and know when to keep our mouths closed and not to let any tumah, any impurity inside. Thank you for listening and have a good Shabbos.